Hello, my name is Craig Schreiner. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank the committee, Catherine, and Kevin for asking me to be here, for John, I think P, who submitted a tape, and for John S, who took me golfing, and was so glad that I could have a chance to spend some time with Keith, someone who at a different time in my sobriety when I needed some help was there for me. He's the, what I like to call the fire plug of serenity in Alcoholics Anonymous, and after you play golf with him, you'll know what I mean. And my good friend Cliff, who I was able to take and fill his belly full of steak in Kansas City when he was through town one time. And Kelly, oh my gosh, he came down from San Francisco. What a very considerate and thing to do, and I can't believe that someone would come that far on a day like today that's turned out like it has. To see this many wonderful faces is really, well, it's an honor. Speaker last night was brilliant, and I mean that in all sincerity. Articulate, intelligent, aware, here, sensitive, compassionate. It's just an honor to be in a room full of people that can sit down and listen to someone talk about the highs and the lows and be able to identify with them. I love to see the facets sparkle once the rough sides are chipped away through this unbelievable design of living that really works, this process that absolutely works for whoever walks in the door. I suffer from the disease of alcoholism, and as my sponsors explained it to me, it's a fourfold disease. It's physical. And when I took my last drink of alcohol, I had what's described as an allergic reaction. And it took me about 16 months to stop drinking. And I couldn't have told you after I took that drink how long it was going to take. It was just an allergic reaction. And that's the thing that is so complex and baffles medical doctors. They just can't figure it out. It's a mental disease. If I am left to my own devices, I will distort the truth. I will withhold the truth. I will change and rearrange things to basically reflect a self-centered, fear-based motivation for life. This is the center of the universe. For any of you that are out there wondering where it is, it's right here. And I'm afraid to tell you that. It's absolutely an emotional disease. My first drunk at 13 was a euphoric state of mind that unfortunately didn't last very long. But I realized instantaneously that I no longer needed to worry about growing up. Because what I had was this wonderful buffer that it created in me. I didn't need to worry about being selfless. I didn't have to worry about developing courageous deeds. I didn't want to ever focus my life on being selfless. I didn't want to worry about my brothers and parents' needs first. I didn't want to become charitable. I didn't want to become a stellar member of society. I just knew with alcohol in me, I did not need to grow up. And it's a spiritual disease. I didn't need God. I just didn't need God. Sponsor today, as I have argued, always made an impression on me with three areas in the big book. And it starts on page 27 with him. And here's that situation where Dr. Jung is talking to Roland, this chronic alcoholic who's left the United States, gone all the way over to Austria to plead with Sigmund Freud's colleague, one of the greatest psychoanalytic minds in the world. Can you do anything to help me? And he's begging Dr. Jung, is there anything? And Dr. Jung is looking at this guy saying, sorry, resentment breath, but there's nothing I can do to help a chronic alcoholic of your case. There's nothing I can do. And he thinks that he's fallen into hell and the gates have just sort of closed in behind him. But he said, there is one thing though, you fear-based little moron. that might help you. And it's a vital spiritual experience. And this experience it's like phenomena. We have to sort of take the ideas that are currently motivating your life and cast them aside, and we want a whole new philosophy to dominate you and completely change your thinking. And my sponsor noted that the word vital spiritual experience was written in italics. And at the bottom of that page on 27, it says, see spiritual appendix. So we go to the back of the book next. And I read this, and he wanted me to understand what the indispensables to having this spiritual experience were. Honesty, open-mindedness, and the willingness to take action. And in the very last paragraph of that spiritual appendix are two words that I just can remember the most easily. Yeah, but. Yeah, but I can't be an alcoholic. I'm too young. Yeah, but I got a college degree. I cannot possibly join the amoebas of America, and yeah, but I only got fired from one job now because of alcohol. Yeah, but I didn't have to drink all day, just a certain portion of the day. Contempt prior to investigation will keep Craig Schreiner in ignorance forever. Contempt prior to investigation. That means my mind has just closed shut to any new concept or idea. And he warned me that in doing that, you don't stand a chance. Now he takes me from the back of the book and then he puts me on page 45 and wants me to read 3 more paragraphs there. And basically the one thing I read but didn't quite understand has something to do with the disease of alcoholism. And it's the lack of power. That's the dilemma. It's not alcohol. Alcohol is only a symptom of the disease of alcoholism. And the speaker last night alluded to maybe 2.5 years of dryness in alcohol. And mine was just about as long. Because I hadn't started to work on the ism. And that the lack of power, getting in touch with this power greater than myself, was the reason that the book was really written, according to what it says on page 45. Now that concludes the intellectual side of my sharing with you today. I'm going to divert very quickly now to my own personal experience, and it goes downhill very quickly. I just described in a couple of minutes what the disease of alcoholism is, what has to happen in order to arrest it, and the tools that are necessary to bring about the spiritual experience. Now, the vital spiritual experience, the life-threatening spiritual experience. And it's taken many years to go from here to here. And as a matter of fact, it's about halfway, I think. I don't know. It's still, I still think my program is stuck somewhere in my throat. And it's easy to talk about it. It's hard to really live it, and it's really harder to feel it. Something that describes me best is a situation that I'll always remember. And I grew up, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, second of 4 boys. And but my parents moved back to Akron, Ohio, which is where I actually grew up from ages 5 on up. And it was a Friday morning. Woke up getting ready to go to school, Catholic school, and it snowed so intensely that school was canceled. Now you can imagine, I didn't even plan that, and it was a free day. And one of the greatest things in the world is something that happens that you don't plan. And here we didn't have to go to school, and it was on a Friday, which meant we had 3 days. And I decided I was going to go out and shovel snow. For some reason, it just occurred to me, go shovel snow. So I thought I would do that. And I got all bundled up, left, went outside, shoveled our walk, shoveled the driveway, I think. And my mom told me that the lady across the street had called and wanted to know if I could shovel her walk, that her husband wasn't feeling well. So I said, sure. So I went across the street and shoveled her walk, finished that up. And she said that the lady next door thought if I had the energy, it would be nice to come over and do that. And this woman gave me some money for what I did. And then I went down to the next walk, and I went to the next walk, next walk. I shoveled snow for 5 or 6, 7 hours. And I mean, I just went all the way down the street that day. I had in my possession the most money I've ever had in my whole life. $6 or $7. I'll never forget it. I was loaded. I'll be 48 in August, so this was about 40 years ago. And can you imagine $6 or $7, that much money, and nobody knew I had it? And it occurred to me, maybe I should take it home and put it in the piggy bank. I had one of those things. I didn't really opt for saving much at that point in my life, but that thought just went in, one ear and out the other, and I went to my favorite place in the whole world, and that was a place called Blackie's. And I'll never forget when my mother took me there. When we walked in there, everybody was happy. There were all these people sitting on these stools that, went around and around. They were on this stainless steel pedestals, and there was a big marble bar, and there was mirrors behind it with all these glasses, all different sizes. They were all shiny, and people were just having a great time there. And I burst into Blackie's, and I started buying drinks for total strangers. And it was a soda fountain. It was my favorite place in the whole world to go. And here I come blowing into town, and I'm buying Cokes and things for people I don't even know. I'm just spending this money as fast as I could. And I was like this little big shot. I was. And nobody taught me how to be a little big shot. It just came to me. It did. And after I had, really eaten a lot of ice cream and Coke and candy and all this sort of stuff, I thought, maybe I should get something for my brothers. And I said, you know what, I was thinking if I could get one of these model cars that I could build, my idol, Ernie, who lived next door, would, welcome me into his clan. Now, Ernie was 17 or 18 years old, I figure, had the tattoo, had a 55 Chevy, had girlfriends that were huge. They were just big, they were gorgeous, and I was just in awe of this guy, And I thought if I could get one of these model cars and build it, he would accept me into his clan. We could start double dating, we could start hanging out, doing things like that. Because I remember seeing in his room one time that he had all these types of models that he built. He had aircraft carriers and jet planes, and he had trucks, and he had cars, and I thought, well, if I build this, he'll love me. So I get this model, I buy this model, I take it home, I give my brothers their gifts, and I can't wait to get this thing going. I get upstairs and I rip the cover off this thing, and I take the top of this box. I'll never forget it. The car was on there with the big wheels and the motor sticking through the thing and the fire coming out of the manifold, and there's a girl with a bathing suit on, right, leaning up against it, and she was going to watch me make this thing. And I'm struggling, and I'm putting this thing together. Now, after about 2 hours of this, what I have in front of me does not even remotely resemble what the girl is leaning up against on the box. Matter of fact, I think she started to frown when I showed it to her. And I started to feel a little bit ashamed of what I'd done, because I kind of wasted all this money and all this time. And I thought, oh my God, I was going to be the hero of class. I was going to take it into, second grade, whatever I was in. And they were going to ooh and ah and envy me. And Ernie was going to, take me into the fold, and I was going to hang out with him. And so I went downstairs to, just actually in sort of self-pity, to tell my dad I'd kind of ruined all this model and made a mess of this money. I'll never forget when I got up, there was something stuck on the bottom of my foot. And I try to shake it off, I rip it off, and this thing says instructions. Now, what's the point? Here I am. I am a little big shot, and nobody has to teach me how to do this. And I also have the inability to ask for help. It never occurred to me, go over to Ernie's. Hey, Ernie, this is Craig, your new friend. Can you show me how to build this model? Never occurred to me to ask him. Never occurred to me to even ask my dad. Dad, will you show me how to do this? Or my older brother. I just thought you just go do it. And so I was just going to do it. So here I am. I had all this money. I blew it all. Had all the energy in the world to shovel all this snow all day. And then I lacked the inability to ask for help. Now just throw something flammable on that, like alcohol. The first drunk at 13, we're sleeping out. It's all the guys, right? It's Friday night. We stole the beer from Dr. Hart's office, from his garage, and it's August in Ohio, so it's probably, at night it's about 75, 80 degrees. And so is the beer, 75, 80 degrees. And it was these tall beers, because I remember there was 48 of them or 24, whatever it was, in one of the cases. And we opened up these things, and the stuff came out. I'll never forget, my first drink went in my mouth and completely out my nose. Just like I looked like a walrus with thrush, kind of like Cliff does with his mustache. It was just sort of coming out. And it burned, and it made my eyes, burn, and I coughed, and all I remember was everybody else was doing, so I kept drinking them, though. I mean, it tasted awful. That was my point, but I kept drinking it. Now, after the third or fourth beer, though, something happened. The campfire sort of, crackling, and all of a sudden I realized I'm as warm as the fire. And all those guys sitting around the fire that I really wanted to be their friend, they were laughing they were laughing with me. We were just having the greatest time. It just slowed down for the first time in my whole life. Life was actually at the speed that I wanted it for a change. And it felt so good. I just never forget how nice it was. Oh my God, the world is great. And it was euphoric. It just came over me, head to my toes. It was wonderful. Now, the only problem was, I don't know how long that lasted. I think maybe 5 minutes, because I don't remember just anything else. All I remember is just the next morning. I'm waking up, and I can't see anything, and I swear my eyes are open. And the guys are laughing. I'm hearing them, but I can't see them. And all of a sudden, I'm smelling things like urine and, a couple other excretions and vomit, and I still can't see. And they're calling my name, and they're laughing, and I have no idea. I can't see. I think I'm losing my mind. All of a sudden, I realize I'm head first in my sleeping bag, and my feet are sticking out the end. And it takes me a while to kind of come to as to where I am. And I look like some sort of metamorphosis, like a cocoon, something coming out of it. You know how that struggles and it finally comes out and it's full of goo and doesn't know what to do, starts licking itself. And I came out of this sleeping bag. He's done it right over there. That's it. And I came out of this sleeping bag. I metamorphed, right in front of these people. And all I have on is my tennis shoes and I'm naked. And my jeans are up in the tree and they're smoldering. They must have been on fire somehow. I don't even know how that happened. And I'm naked and they're laughing at me. And they said, "You were so funny. We had no idea you were that funny." And that's all it took. Now, I'm not even aware that I'm starting to sort of take a little inventory of where I am. And I'm starting to realize, oh yeah, there was alcohol last night. I see all the bottles laying around. I'm naked. I stink. I got stuff all over me. Now they're laughing at me. I don't know what this feeling is that I've got, and it's a hangover. I've never had one of those, but I didn't know whether to throw up or vomit or pass out. And all I could remember when I was just, sort of center stage, and all these guys were looking at me like I was in a cage, laughing, telling me how funny I was I got to get some more of this alcohol. I couldn't wait to start to drink again. That's the first time I drank, and just. For 13 more years, it just gets worse. It just gets worse. That was the first drunk, though. It was extraordinary when I think back about it. Time came when I was 24 years old. Drinking every single day was the only way I could survive. Junior high school, college. Life without alcohol was not thinkable. It was always there in some measure, form, or whatever. Or sometimes just knowing that the alcohol was close by would just get me through the moment, because I knew it was just there. It had such a power over me. And I was literally, imprisoned. That's the word that is best. I was just imprisoned. Couldn't go anywhere unless it was somewhere around me. And here I am now, it's 24 years of age. Somehow got through 4 years of college. A lot of it I really don't remember. And I'm laying in bed, and I've got a job, and I'm afraid to get up and leave the bedroom. I'm so petrified. I'm so full of fear. I'm so full of anguish. I'm so full of terror. And my dad walks by and says, "Craig, it's a little, it's about 7:30. You should be going." I said, "Dad, I'm too afraid to leave the house." He walked over to the bed and looks down on me and says, "What are you afraid of?" I said, "I'm just afraid." I didn't realize that it was the sense of impending doom was this cloud that was in me, over me, and around me. I couldn't describe it, and I felt so worthless in front of my father, not able to tell him, Dad, I'm just scared to death and I don't even know what. Call it the boogeyman, I don't care, whatever it is, but that's how ashamed I felt. In the eyes of my father, at 24 years of age, I was scared to go outside and play. And I said, Dad, I think I'm an alcoholic. Now, just at that very moment, my stepmother is walking past the bedroom and hears me say it. And she walks right in and she goes, Charles, that's my dad's name, didn't we just buy a refrigerator the other day from a man who was in Alcoholics Anonymous? Why don't we give him a call? I'm going, what are you talking about? I'm thinking, that's just crazy. That's crazy. That night, there's Freddie, the salesman from Sears, who's going to take me to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I'll never forget, I open up the door and look down at him, and he looks up at me, and he said, you're kind of young. And I said, you're pretty old. And he said, hi, my name is Fred, I'm an alcoholic. And he said, I'm here to take you to a meeting. And he says, but first, I'm going to take you somewhere special. Oh, what great, I'm thinking, this will be wonderful, Next thing I realize, I'm in a hospital. I'm in an elevator, and I'm losing it. I'm 12 hours dry. There's no detox. There's nothing like that. And I'm starting to really panic. Like, what have I gotten myself into? And I'm in an elevator. The door's closed, and I think I'm ready to just jump out of my skin. The elevator goes up to the 7th floor, and it opens up, and there she is staring at me. Sister Mary Resentment is looking right at me. This Catholic nun in bronze, man, and I just flashed back just like that. I'm 24 years old, and I go back to the 4th grade. I'm sitting in a Catholic school, bored, because it ain't going fast enough. And I'm teasing the guy next to me and saying something, and Sister Mary Carmel called me and said, Craig, if you have something to share, why don't you share it with the rest of the class? I said, all right, why don't you eat a sandwich with something in it? And if you're new, you can put whatever you want in between that bread. And when I told her to eat that sandwich, she came, they were still wearing the long robes and the bead. She flew across the floor, grabs me by the ear, and rips me up out of the seat. And when I said that, I knew that was the dumbest thing I ever did in my whole life. And she freaked, just freaked. Everybody in the class, their mouths were open. There was like dead silence. They couldn't believe I couldn't believe I said it. She panics. She can't discipline me in front of this class, so she takes me upstairs to the Mother Superior. So it takes 2 of them now to figure out what to do. She whispers in her ear what I said because she couldn't repeat it aloud in front of me. And Mother Superior's eyes light up. I'll never forget that when they went like that. And then they both ran around like little mad people. And they knew they had to do something, but they didn't know what. Wash his mouth out. Wash his mouth. So they tried to find a bar of soap. There wasn't any, but there was the powdered soap. So I get this blast of borax powdered soap all over the place. Now that is clean and sober, folks. That's clean and sober. And then they kicked me out of school. And I'll never forget when I came back to school and they let me back in, which was a couple days later. Although I'm in the 4th grade, I have to sit in the 2nd grade because I act like a 2nd grader. And I have to wear the little thing, on the front. Well, the reason why I digress back to the 4th grade, even though I'm in this elevator, was because that was the last time I had any kind of contact with the agents of God. Because after I did that, in that classroom, in the 4th grade, I kind of realized, well, if this is the way the agents of God are treating me, God must not want anything to do with me. And where I was, that special place that Freddie took me, was Sister Ignatia Hall in St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, Ohio, where the only person who would accept the drunks in Akron, Ohio, was a Catholic nun, Sister Ignatia. Little teeny thing. As they say in Ireland, she was wee. But she was powerful. And he was taking me to what he considers his most special place. I was not impressed. We went out, he says, come on, I want you to meet the guys. Oh yeah, this will be good. And we went into this back room, and all these guys have their butts hanging out of these things that they're wearing. You know, they're the inmates, or they're just the, you know, they whatever. And he wanted to know if I wanted a shot. I said, about time. Vitamin B12 right in the rear end, you know. And I was not impressed. I was bored. I was 24 years old, and I knew I was in the wrong place. So he takes me to my first meeting that night, and oddly enough, it was a young girl that spoke. But I was a little busy, preoccupied at the time, so I didn't hear much of what she had to say. I do remember this, though. After Freddie had dropped me off, I thought to myself after this meeting, I said, you know, I am really glad that I came to this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, from this day point, this is really a point in my life where I knew I needed this. This is amazing. From here on in, I'm just going to control my drinking. And I had that thought. I was living in a delusion that I could somehow, someday, drink normally. I mean it with every ounce of energy I had. I just thought, I'll just control it. I have to control it. And before I got home from that first meeting, I bought a 6-pack of beer and I drank it. Because tomorrow I'll just control it. Plain and simple. I'm not ready, and I don't think I ever want to associate with those people. But I really am glad I went there tonight, because I'll just control it. And that's living under a delusion, believing something wrong that I could actually drink normally. Now that 6-pack of beer, it took me about 14 to 16 months, I can't remember exactly when, to stop drinking. That was my last allergic reaction. And on March 6th in the evening, in the midst of an absolutely grotesque, lie-filled, phony-ass conversation with my girlfriend, I hit the knees, and just like our speaker last night, I said 3 words. God, help me. And I meant it. And he has. I'd like to tell you this is the part where I really get sober, but no. I walked down the street, checked myself into the detox center because I know the medical director. We played golf. I figured extra Valium, good-looking nurse, room with a view. You know, I know the medical director. I got to get some sort of, that's where I'm going. I don't know where you'd go, but that's where I'm going. So I checked myself in. The next morning, Dr. DeBart comes in, got the chart. And I'm ashamed. This is my golf pal for many years, a man I respect, a medical doctor. And I couldn't even look up at him, and I said, Andy, I'm sorry. I said, I'm glad you're here. He said, I'll never forget that. I'm glad you're here. Then he said something that startled me. He said, you can't stay here. What? He says, we're too good of friends. You know, in Al-Anon, they teach us that we need to put a little distance between each other. I'm going, what is that, you know? I need you, Andy. You're going to have the extra Valium. I'm going to get the, the stuff I need. I mean, I know you. I can throw your name around, I'm, just basically a phony, and you're the only reason I'm human, because I just know you. Deeply shallow. That's the best way to describe me. Deeply shallow. And so he sends me to what was described as a sanitarium in More About Alcoholism. It wasn't the Betty Ford, let's go play some golf and get sober sort of experience, It wasn't, we're going to carve ashtrays and make leather belts. It was a sanitarium. Number one, I didn't even know what a sanitarium was. And 2, I got put in the back of a Volkswagen Bug. This is 1978. There's a big black guy sitting shotgun and a little teeny white guy. I called them yin and yang. Were taking me down to the sanitarium. I'm scared to death. I'm having, just fits of detoxation or whatever you call it in the back of this Volkswagen Bug. And they took me to the center of Ohio somewhere, and when we pulled up to this Molly Stark Sanitarium, isn't that a great name for a woman, Molly Stark? It was a Quaker nurse who liked to hurt people, I think. I don't know why they, you know. And we pulled up to this brownstone building, and I swear as we walked into this place, clouds formed over the top of it, just like the movies, you know. And the alcoholic ward wasn't on the third floor or the second floor or the first floor where there's a beautiful view of the pastures, you know, and the serene pastoral setting and all that. It was in the basement where the bars on the windows are, you know. And I was petrified. I was scared to death. 26 years old, and this is what I've become. This is where I've ended up. And I was petrified. And I didn't come out of my room for 3 days. I refused to come out of my room and associate with those amoebas, those derelicts of society. I just was disgusted with where I was. And in my hibernation in my room, they had mentioned that there'll be some members of Alcoholics Anonymous coming down to talk to us. The counselor was adamant about the fact that when I left that institution, that sanitarium, that the only thing that was really going to help me was going to Alcoholics Anonymous. So the sponsors would come in and talk. And I'll never forget Dave S., who came in and talked to me. Now, as soon as Dave S. walked through my door, I just turned off because he looked not quite what I wanted. Just wasn't quite what I wanted. Had the hair greased back and the t-shirt and the, you know, tattoo and the boots and the, you know, and the, you know, he just looked rough, you know, and scared me a little bit. And when he started to share his experience, his last experience of drunk, when he was trying to hack his wife's limb off with a butcher knife, I asked him if I could excuse myself for 1 second, and I left. And I went to the counselor's office, and I knocked on Donna's office, and I'll never forget Donna. Donna was about 6'10", weighed about 118 pounds, and was pregnant. She looked like a thermometer. I'll never forget the silhouette on this woman. And I looked at Donna, and I said, Donna, this person, is this my sponsor? And she said, she kind of laughed. She said, no, he's just here to talk to you. And I'll never forget how relieved I was. And I went back into the room, and this guy's still sitting there. I listened to the rest of what he had to say, and I was glad when he left. Now, the next day, another sponsor came down. Now, he was different. He had white hair, and he had the nice coat on with the, you know, the patch on the elbow, and he had a pipe that was real aromatic, and penny loafers, and he was a professor of law. Now, I thought I could use a lawyer. This guy's not threatening. You know, I like this. He's got the requirements, I think, measure up to what I need in a sponsor. And we ended up in a great relationship. His name was Hollis. Matter of fact, we had a great relationship. Fabulous. I never called him, and he never called me. It was perfect. It was perfect. Got a sponsor? Yeah. And for the next 13, 14 months, I would go to meetings. I would go to one meeting, actually, the meeting that Hollis started, Tuesday night men's Hilltop. And I would play golf 6 or 7 times a week, because that was my program for recovery, was one meeting a week, because I was afraid not to go to AA. And I wouldn't associate with any of my old friends because they told me that was dangerous, so I just played golf every chance I could and go to one meeting a week. And that worked for a while. And that was my white-knuckle sobriety. One night at this one meeting that I would go to, I noticed in the back of the room there was someone who'd never been in there. And he looked a little rough. I'm thinking, okay, he's a new guy. So I'll never forget, I bolted over to the end of the room and I put my hand out and I said, hi, my name is Craig. I'm an alcoholic, and if you keep coming to these meetings, these people can help you. And this guy, I'll never forget it. He had his coat drug over his shoulder, and his hair was all messed up, and he had this Pall Mall cigarettes with an ash that long that never fell off. He coughed, he bent over, the ash would just stay on. It would never fall off. I don't know how they did that. And he looked at me, and he kind of smiled, and he said, thanks. And then I went on my self-centered way. People would say, Craig, how you doing? I'd say, wonderful, fantastic. I hated you. I hated myself. I didn't want to be there. You know, I would just say, I'm great. I'm great. How are you? Fine, thanks. Now, What I was doing then the rest of the week was playing golf. Now, I remember about 4 or 5 days later, I was playing golf alone and cheating. Let's think about that. Who am I cheating? Seriously, playing golf alone and cheating. I would miss it and I would say that doesn't count. Oh, that doesn't matter. And I was standing over this shot, my second shot on a par 5, and I noticed on this hole that the people in front of me, the threesome in front of me, were on the green. Now, those of you that don't play golf, just bear with me. Now, normally it takes 3 shots to hit a par 5. And you get 2 putts to make your par, and that's it. Well, I've already hit my tee shot. As a matter of fact, I thought to myself, well, those people are on the green. I can probably go ahead and hit. As a matter of fact, I think I'll just take a little less club and lay up. As a matter of fact, for the first time since I've been playing golf, I actually thought about a little article I read by this guy named Jack Nicklaus. You know, he's pretty good player. And he said if you want to be a good golfer, you should project a mental image or take an inventory of the shot you want to hit. You know, kind of take it, a little picture in your mind, visualize it. And so I did this for the first time since I played golf. Because golf to me at this point was grab the club, put the ball down, and try and kill it. And if you miss it, it doesn't count. If you look up the word denial in the dictionary, there's a picture of me with a golf club in my hand. You know, that's a good example for me to remember. So anyway, I'm going to lay this shot up so that I don't hit these people on the green. Well, you know what? I did this thing that Jack Nicklaus told me to do, and I just took the club back, and I made one of the easiest swings because I was just going to lay it up, and the ball takes off like a missile. Never hit a shot. I never ever adopted an easy does it approach to golf, and I did on this particular shot, and this ball's taken off. Matter of fact, I thought I hit the wrong club. It's going so fast. I realize it's going to hit the green where these 3 people are, and I scream, 4! And it just misses this guy on the right side of the green. I'm going, oh my God, am I glad I didn't hit him. Now I'm walking up to the green. Now I can be thrown off the golf course for this kind of, etiquette. It's very self-centered. It's very disturbing to do something like, because you can kill somebody with one of these golf balls. And here I am, this walking big book, at 20 months dry in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the guy I almost killed was the new guy I saw at the meeting the other night. Here I am, this walking big book, And just before I could apologize to this little guy, he looked at me and he said, "That was a nice shot." He said, "Oh yeah, thank you. It was a 5-wood. Thank you very much." Started patting myself on the back. And I didn't even say, "I'm sorry, I almost killed you." Now this individual didn't say, "I'm going to call the ranger over here and have you thrown off the golf course." He said, "Why don't you join us?" I said, "Well, thanks." So I finished a round of golf. Now after the golf was over, I thought to myself, he's new. Take him to a meeting. And I looked at him and I said, "You want to go to a meeting?" And he looked at me and he said, "Sure," he said. So we get in the car. And I'm driving him to a meeting. I'm taking him to the Saturday. Where should I go? "Oh, yeah, Copley. I heard there's a meeting there on Saturday night." And we happen to be close. So we drove to this Saturday night meeting. We went to it was a speaker meeting. And after the meeting, it occurred to me, fellowship. I've heard of this. "Do you want to go get something to eat?" And he looked at me and he said, "Sure," he said. So I'm taking him to a restaurant. Now I'm thinking, okay, start telling him how to stay sober. I said, "No, we got a lot of different kinds of meetings, and we've got literature, that's in the rooms." And I'll never forget thinking I should start reading the literature. I really should start reading this literature. I was thinking this. I really was. Then I was trying to tell them about, how AA works, and I'm telling them, we got all these different meetings. We have an intergroup office, of which I'm thinking, well, I wonder where that is, too, I was having all these thoughts, We got to the restaurant. We had already ordered, and I've got a mouthful of food. I'm just sort of chomping away. And this is really the first time this person's ever had a chance to say anything. And he asked me about something that was on page 45. And I said, I don't remember that part too well, and I just sort of let it roll off my shoulders, sort of let that one slide. And then he asked me about something that was on page 27. And then he said something about a 12 and what? 12 and 12, And I'm thinking, what is that? And I got this thought. Maybe he's not new. And I'm thinking, and all of a sudden I'm starting to feel kind of weird. And I looked at him and I said, how long have you been in Alcoholics Anonymous? And half the people in the restaurant heard us. Now, I almost killed him with a golf ball earlier, and everybody in the room knows that he's in AA. And he looked at me and he said, a reasonable length of time, Craig. What else do you know about staying sober? And I couldn't swallow. I had a mouthful of food. My body temperature shoots up to about 150 degrees. I start sweating profusely. I realize I have made a serious mistake here. And I sort of swallowed a little glass of water and said, I'm really sorry. I said, how long have you been sober? 16. No, 17 years, Craig. What else do you know is in the big book? Now, this new guy that I was going to sponsor, that is my sponsor today. Now, what's the point? What is the point of that? It's cunning, it's baffling, it's powerful. 3 or 4 days later, my Hollis, my sponsor that I never used and I never called, has a massive heart attack and he's in the hospital. It occurred to me maybe I should go see him. So I went to Akron City Hospital, where Dr. Bob used to perform surgery, and I find Hollis, and I'll never forget, as I walked into the room, he's strapped down, he's got all these things in his arms, and he's got these EKGs and all this equipment. And just as I walked in the room, he lit up and smiled and said, Craig, I was just thinking about you. And that surprised me. And I came in and I sat down and he said, I just wanted to talk to you. I was just thinking about you. He said, I've been thinking, and it's time that maybe you should get serious about recovery. You should really start to get involved a little bit more. You should try to hang out with winners. And I said, it is so weird that you say that, Hollis, that just the other day they asked me to moderate a panel of old-timers. Now here I am, I'm going to moderate a panel of old-timers in AA. This was 20 years ago. And there's still people living that knew Bill and Bob in Akron. Still people living. And I'm going to moderate this panel. And Hollis looked at me and he said, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is exactly what I'm talking about. And then we went on to talk, well, what should I do? Well, hey, this is how you do it. And we just talked and talked and talked about it. That's Hollis right there, actually. I'll never forget, as I was leaving his hospital room, it occurred to me to ask him how he's doing. Yeah. And I said, Hollis, what's up? He said, well, tomorrow about 3 o'clock, I'm supposed to have this bypass surgery. And I said, all right. I'll go do my meeting thing, and I'll get back in touch with you. So next Sunday, or the next day, I was at the meeting, and I'll never forget, I had looked at a watch, and it was 3 o'clock, and I said a prayer for Hollis. I just took a moment of silence for myself and said a prayer. And then went on through that event and got home that night and called his wife, Flo. As soon as I got home, I said, hi, this is Craig. I'd never met her. I said, I'm someone that Hollis sponsors, and I was just calling to see how he is. And she said, I'm glad you called. She said, but he didn't make it through the operation today. And I just went dead. I mean, it's just like the wind got sucked out of me. Can I help you? And I don't even know where that came from. And she said, I don't even know what to do. It's Sunday night. I don't know whether the kids should go to school. I don't know. I said, I'll be right over. And I went over to her house. As a matter of fact, I even picked up some milk. I picked up some bread. I picked up some stuff. And I went into the house and I said, what do we do next? And we made some phone calls and I tried to help out with little things. And I didn't leave until I knew she was okay. Things were settled down. We had some phone conversations. Then I went home. And then next thing when I woke up that next morning, I was just right over there. For the next 3 days, I just did whatever Flo needed to have done, period. Didn't think about anything else, I just did it. Didn't ask my parents, didn't ask this, I just did it. And I'll never forget, at the wake for Hollis, there were hundreds of people that came to this. Hundreds of people from Alcoholics Anonymous, the dean of the university, the mayor of Akron. I'm listening to these people rave and talk about this man. who I don't even know. I don't even know him. And he was my sponsor for a year. And I felt like I missed something. I missed an opportunity. And it's all sort of occurring to me while I'm kind of trying to catch up with what's going on. And after this 3 or 4 days, I'm kind of wandering around Akron lost in sobriety, clueless. And I went to a Thursday night meeting. It was Thanksgiving night. And the meeting was closed because the church was closed that day. Matter of fact, the parking lot was empty. It should have been a clue to me, but just as I'm leaving, there's another car pulling in. And I figured, well, they don't know about the meeting's closed. And I walk up, and it's this new guy that I was going to sponsor, George. I'm sure as soon as he saw me, he wanted to do a 180 and hit the gas. And, oh, my God, here he comes again. And I said, George, the meeting's closed tonight. I'm kind of feeling a little lost. Do you want to get something to eat? And he said, sure, he says. So we go to this restaurant and we start talking. And I immediately say, will you be my sponsor? And he goes, why? I'm thinking, because I asked you, that's why. And he knew, just by asking, he kind of laughed a little, he knew it pissed me off. He said, no, why? You don't even know if I've got a sponsor. You don't even know if I've worked 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't even know if I've got a home group. You don't even know if I have a sponsor. All right. Do you have a home group? Do you have a sponsor? Do you go to meetings? And we kind of laughed. And he said, I'd be glad to be your sponsor. But there's a couple things I want you to do. And of course, he talked about those 9 paragraphs I talked about. And he wanted me to go home and read them. And he said, do you have a dictionary? I said, sure. I didn't have a dictionary. I'm just an instantaneous people pleaser. I mean, just say something and I'll please you. It may not be right, it may not be honest, it may not be anything, but I'll just please you. Sure, I didn't have anything. He said, I've got some words I want you to look up. I'm thinking, oh, this guy's a little different. We have homework. He said, look up the words I and we. I and we. Well, you don't know the difference. You got the Alcoholics Anonymous, but we can keep you sober. And I didn't know the difference between we and I. I didn't. Me. This was the center of the universe. And he was right. We also had some other things to look up, and I started to do that. Now, with Hollis dying, and me realizing here was a wonderful opportunity to work with an unbelievable member of Alcoholics Anonymous that I just sort of let slip through my fingers, I was a little more alert to what was happening around me. And I started to do what George said, and you know what? Just by chance, we went through all the steps in order, with reading and prescribed homework and a series of words I needed to look up. And then also give them definitions too. And I want to capsulate this. The part that really showed a lot was the inventory. And I'll condense this to 3 areas. Fears. Living in the future. He would ask me, why do you want to live in the future, Craig? I had 1,000 different kinds of fears. I mean, just pick one, and I had it. And he showed me, basically, if you keep coming to meetings and don't drink, you get the faith that if you keep doing that, you'll stay sober. And that it's really living in the future, you know. And I looked up, I said, it's George, fears are like, you know, projecting into the future things that really don't happen. Why do you want to live in the future, he'd say. Now, when I wasn't in the future, I was resenting the past. Resentment's #1 killer. Did you look the word up, Craig? Yeah, I looked up the, what does it mean, Craig? Well, it kind of means to refill the hurt of the past. Why do you want to live in the past, Craig? Strangling that little guy, you know? And that day, in, you know, working through that 4-step and those resentments and realizing that it's my side of the street I'm cleaning up here, What could I have done to be a little more patient, tolerant, understanding? What did I do to really provoke that situation? Where could I have been a little more understanding? And you know what? He showed me basically all of my problems were all of my own making. And you know what? I swallowed that bit of truth about myself that day. And it didn't taste that bad. It tasted a hell of a lot better than Seagram 7 does at 6:30 in the morning. Oh yeah, I heard a whew. That is right. Remember that first one at 6:30 in the morning after you don't even know where you were last night? Cliff does. And you just go like this. You just get one of those all the way down your back. Yeah. Accepting the truth about myself, though, did not taste like that. Matter of fact, it went down, stayed down. Now, when I wasn't resenting the past or fearing the future, I was experiencing guilt about sex in the present. And I had to read that part of my big book, in my inventory about that sex, and I just went through that whole thing. I'll never forget, I did the whole thing without stopping, and I read the whole thing. I couldn't look him square in the eyes. I was so ashamed of the things that I'd done, and I never told anybody this stuff. I didn't even remember I did that stuff, and I did it, and I wrote it down. And I got done with all of it. I said it all in one sentence, I swear, and I looked up, and I caught my sponsor yawning. And he knew I saw him yawning, and he looked at me and he said, well, it was boring, he said. And then he told me a little about his sex life, and I go, oh my God, I didn't even know you could do stuff like that. Wow. This is not like against the law, you know? I'm thinking, whoa. And in that several hours where the fifth step sort of came about with laughing and crying and sharing and identifying, here I stood in front of another man, another alcoholic. Literally all the layers were gone. Every bit, all that onion stuff was out there laying on the floor. And he said three things to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, he forgave me for what I'd done. He said, God forgives you for what you've done. Now I want you to spend the rest of your life forgiving yourself for what you've done. And he planted inside of me that day, and I was unaware of it, a seed called self-respect. But this time it was different. When the police tried it, when the counselors tried it, when my parents tried it, I had a lot of weeds in there. But the inventory was like pulling weeds out, and for the first time there was some soil there that had been tilled. And I'd like to tell you this is the part where I really get sober, but no. Do I get involved in the conference? No. Do I set up meetings? No. Do I make coffee? No. I'm going to start playing more golf and going out with girls that can put sentences together. I'm going to go on a happy dry drunk. Let the new guy put the chairs up. He needs that kind of thing. What do you mean, pick up that new guy? What if he throws up in my car? I don't have time. I gotta go. I gotta play some more golf. Now the happy dry drunk gets worse. It gets into the spiritual dry drunk. I'm not going to that meeting over there again. They don't read how it works first. What kind of a group doesn't read how it works first? You know what? Some of those people in there, you know, I heard that guy did something, and you know what? That's really not that kind of members of AA I want to hang out with. You know, I've done my fifth step. And if you haven't done your fifth step, I don't know if I really should even be seen with you in AA. And I'm kind of, you know, following that pursuit, that line of thinking and all that belligerence. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, this is really something that's kind of, well, it's for other people to do. And I remember I got a letter in the mail from the 25th Ikipa, and they wanted me to come and speak. I'm thinking, this is news. They finally have realized who has the message. And I should call my sponsor and share this with him. And I dialed George up and I said, George, You can't believe what I just got from Mickey Paul. They want me to come and speak. And he interrupted me. He said, did you look up those words I gave you? And folks, I don't even remember him giving me any words to look up. No, what are they? Pompous, arrogant, conceited, haughty. And he just went at me like a machine gun, just ripping me at these things. You were at the meeting the other night. Yeah, I was, yeah. Did you shake that new guy's hand in the back of the room? I didn't even know he was there. And at that point in time, he went into me like I'd never heard him in my whole life, like I'd never heard him talk to anybody else. And he says, is this your idea of sobriety? He says, quite frankly, if you think this is the program of recovery, it stinks. And I want you to spend a week, and you go around Akron, and you get to some meetings, and you find a sponsor that can actually get the message to you, because you ain't cutting it. I must have the wrong number. I got the wrong number. This is not the guy that I called to tell him that I'm supposed to go talk. And he's firing me. I'm calling him to tell him how great I am, and he's firing me. I don't get it. I don't get it. And all of a sudden I realized he was serious. And I got my dictionary down. I said, George, what were those words again? Was it pompous, arrogant? Because I said, these are all related. Yeah, aren't they? All the same. I begged him, don't fire me, don't fire me. And he agreed that I could still use him as my sponsor, but I needed to maybe take a look at some things. And just before I was hung up, he said, what was in that letter? Oh yeah, the reason I called. I said, Icky Pa, they want me to be on a panel. What's the topic? I didn't even know there was such a thing as a topic. This guy's so fast. So fast. What's the topic? What's the topic? I said, I'm reading. Will you just give me a minute? Humility. And in George's kitchen is the linoleum floor. And George drops the phone because he's laughing so hard. And George is this little Cajun. He looks like Yoda, and you can't understand anything he's saying. And he's laughing uncontrollably because I'm going to talk about humility. Now George gains his composure, picks the phone back up, and goes into the I smoke 3 packs of Pall Mall a day coughing soon. And does that for 3 minutes, and I think he's going to die. Finally gets up and he goes, what are you going to say? What's the point? I called him to tell him how well I thought I was doing. And he almost fired me because I was that close to being drunk. And I didn't know it. That is cunning, that's baffling, and that is powerful. And I'd like to tell you that's the point where I really got sober, and it is. That's the point when it changed. Right then and there, it changed. I went to that young people's meeting I heard about. Who's in the back of the room? That new guy that I missed the opportunity to meet the other night. And I went, and I attacked the poor guy. Hi, I'm Craig, and I'm going to keep you sober for the rest of your life. And I grabbed little Scotty and I said, here's a big book, here's some pamphlets, I'm going to drive you. Where do you want to go? You know? I attacked the poor guy, scared him, I know I did. I took him home that night, gave him a ride home, grabbed the big book off the table, gave it to him. He took me places I've never been. I mean, I would travel, it seemed like for endless hours, to a part of Akron, Ohio I'd never been in before. And I realized that the last 4 or 5 cars we passed have no wheels on them, they have no doors on them, no street lights anymore, I'm hearing gunshots. And for the first time in my life, I'm in the hood. I've never been in the hood before, but now I'm in the hood. That was exactly how I felt. I was scared to death. I'll never forget, his stepfather was drunk and on the couch on the front porch. His sister's 2-year-old baby was walking around in the street. His mom comes out of the house. I'll never forget, the screen door flies open with no screen on it. Take that thing off, will you? And comes out and goes, Scotty! And Scotty goes, hi, Mom, I want you to meet my sponsor. Sponsor? I never asked you to be my sponsor. He wants me to come in and have coffee. I gotta go, Scotty, it's getting late, you know? I was uncomfortable. So I go into his house, I'll never forget, we walked into the kitchen, it's really dark in there, and just as we got to the kitchen floor, I stopped at the threshold because it was filthy. And Scotty saw me freeze up, and he laughed. He said, hey, you know the neat thing about our kitchen floor? When the roaches run out here, they just get stuck, and then we just step on them, he said. I didn't stay for coffee. I left. I said, Scotty, listen, I got to go. And I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And about halfway home, I started to cry. I absolutely became overwhelmed and started to cry. Why am I so lucky to live where I live? It came over me like a ton of bricks. Couldn't even sleep that night. Just cried myself to sleep. First thing I did when I got up in the morning was I called Scotty. Scotty, this is Craig. What are you doing today? He said, nothing. I said, I'll be right over. And I went over and picked him up. And we just started hanging out. We were inseparable for a year. We were inseparable. We got involved in the Young People's Conference. What would you do with a guy like Scotty? We put him in charge of the raffle. Scotty was in and out of the detention home 22 times. Scotty grew up in the carnival atmosphere. That's the life he knew, the life of the carnival. And this guy could do anything with his mouth. He could talk people into this, that, and the other. I'll never forget the way he sold raffle tickets. He would basically threaten people if they didn't buy them. Tires were mysteriously flat outside the meeting. He showed me how when you fold bills a certain way and someone gives you a 20, you can actually give them back $6 and they think they got 15 back. And I said, Scotty, you don't do that. He said, yeah, but it's for the conference, he said. And I'm thinking, Scotty, that's called rationalization. We don't do that. Yeah, but it's for the conference, he said. No, Scotty, we do this honestly. We do this. And working with Scotty saved my life. I don't even know where Scotty is today. He moved after he got his 1-year medallion at our young group. Now, Scotty was 14 years old when he got his 1-year medallion. He was our little star. He was our little young people's youngest person who had beat all the odds in terms of his environment and where he came from, and he was our golden boy. And because of the way his family had left, and he had to be moved back down to Georgia, and he hated to go, and I didn't want him to go. I'll never forget, I cried when he had to leave. And I don't even know where Scotty is today. I got a letter from his sister several months after he was down there saying that he started to hang out with the old group again. I couldn't do anything. Scotty saved my life. I don't know if I did anything to help him. I really don't. But he saved my life. And if you're out there, will you call me? Call me, Scotty. Playing golf with my sponsor, and I'm starting to count the strokes now. Every one of them. Every one of them. And I asked my sponsor one day, I said, I wonder who builds these golf courses. Oh, isn't that an interesting question, he said. Why don't we write a letter? So I wrote a letter to some golf course architects. And I didn't get any responses back, and I wrote a bunch more letters. And finally I got a letter back from one man in Ohio, down in Columbus, Ohio. And he said, in this letter, if you want to come down here, I would be glad to take some time with you to share with you how you become a golf course architect. And I was so excited, and I called George. I said, George, can you believe this? I finally found someone who's going to... And I said, I'm going to go down there tomorrow. I said, wait a second. He said, let's make a list of questions. Let's make a list. So we wrote down some questions to ask this man. And I went down there the very next day, and I was so excited. And I sat down and listened to what he had to say, and he started to talk about getting this college degree and that college degree, and then you have some construction experience, then you should have maintenance experience, then you should play competitively, and then you should work for another architect. And every time he said something, I just kind of went, I just shrunk out of sight. This is impossible. And then to finish his conversation, he said, I just want to let you know that your odds of breaking into this business are about the same as being struck by lightning. Well, thanks for that little tidbit of encouragement there. I really needed that to sort of finish this conversation. And I'm thinking, what's the use? And I drove back to Akron that night, just in depression. Called George. George, what did he say? What did he say? George, forget it. 13, 14 years, no guarantees. I got to go back to college. Got to have, this degree and that degree. And he interrupted me. What is the first thing he told you to do, Craig? What's the first thing on his list, Craig? Let me tell you a little something about my sponsor. My sponsor left New Orleans because he couldn't get sober there, and he came out to California to get sober. He did his geographics. Now, he gets a sponsor here from the Folsom Group, just up the road a little ways. And, he starts using this sponsor, and his sponsor gets drunk. And his sponsor is drinking, and of course George goes into the bar where he's drinking and says, okay, I've worked the third step, Lee, what's next? And Lee is saying, George, I'm drinking, will you leave me alone? And he goes, well, you're my sponsor, he said, you're my sponsor. That's the guy I picked for a sponsor. Well, the first thing on the list, George, is go back to school. Well, this isn't that interesting. Let's write a letter, he said. The next thing I realized, several months later, I'm back in college. This time, I'm 5 years sober, 32 years old, taking math class that I've failed every time I've ever taken in high school, and you name it, I couldn't. And this is my worst nightmare come true. It was the first class I have to take is math. And the first day, what does the teacher do? But she offers up a test, which I score 3 out of right, 3 out of 21, the worst grade in the whole class. The next day, she says, does anybody have any questions? And my hand shot up. I'm going, what are you doing, Remember, I had the inability to ask for help, and the first thing that happens is my hand goes up, and I'm in the front row in math. Now, let me digress. The first meeting that George took me to in Alcoholics Anonymous, he and I shook everybody's hand in the room. We didn't wait for them to come to us. We shook everybody's hand, and we sat in the front row at that AA meeting. And you do that with him long enough, and the first reaction when you come to class is you sit in the front row, and you ask for help. And I couldn't believe it actually happened. I said, could you go over questions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Everybody laughed, and one guy in the back of the room said, is there something wrong with him? And I didn't care. After she explained them, I still didn't understand half of them. And I went up to her afterwards, and I'm fearful that this just isn't. It was my first day in class, second day in class. And I said, I still don't get it. And she says, well, maybe you need a tutor. You mean a math sponsor? And she looked at me and she said, well, I guess you could call it that. Where do you get them? I said. Well, in the library. 4:30, I was in the library. Sure enough, there's the math sponsors, and I get a math sponsor. Now, the very first thing this girl says to me, she says, what are you here for? And I said, well, I want to design golf courses, and I really love it, and I have this math class. And she said, okay. She said, now I'm going to try to explain things to you as I get to know you. These abstract terms in math, let's use bunkers, and let's use greens, and let's use tees, and let's use golf clubs. And I would go to class every day because George said I should go to meetings every day, and I would sit in the front row and I would do my homework and I would do the things I was supposed to because that's how I know how to stay sober now after 5 years. And let's shorten this up. It's the last day. We take the final exam. I get the best grade in the class, 173 right out of 175 in a 3-month period. Now, what did I do? The next year, I became a math sponsor for someone else. I applied the same principles to chemistry. I applied the same principles to physics. I applied all these same principles of asking for help and then turning around and giving it away. And you know what? When you're a tutor at Ohio State, they pay you. Not only do you get to do it, but they pay you money to do that. And you want to learn something? Live it. Teach it. I was asked to speak at commencement because I was voted as president of Senate. The student body, amazing. Amazing. When I would go through the lunch line at Ohio State, I was 32, 33, and 34 years old because it took 2 years to get this degree. And I'll never forget, I was surrounded by a lot of young people, they were 18 years old, 19 years old, who really didn't know where they were. They were trying to be cool and dumb and stupid and hip and all that other stuff, and I was there trying to do something with my life. And I'll never forget going through the lunch line, there were these 5 women, and they always had these great meals prepared for us, and I always had a joke for the day for them. Now, my jokes for the day were awful, they stunk, they weren't any good, but every time I'd walk in, they'd smile when they'd see me. There he is. We don't know if he's okay, but he's always trying to cheer us up. Well, the last woman on the end of the line was Mabel. Big German woman. Matter of fact, she would measure the amount of potatoes you would get by the size of your head. And at the end of the year, the first year there, she said, "Craig," she said, "do you have a place to stay next year?" And I said, "No, Mabel, I don't. I know I can't stay with Mrs. Shank because she's going to have to live with her in-laws because she's getting too old." I said, "But I don't." She said, "Why don't you come out to the house and look at our place?" So I drove out to her house that night. And it's this beautiful farm. It's on like 1,200 acres, and it's a 100-some-year-old house, and it's a great setting. It's very serene and beautiful. I'll never forget driving up the drive. It's about a half-mile long, and she shows me the entire upper floor on this century home, this old home. And it's been newly renovated. It's beautiful. And as I'm walking downstairs, I'm thinking, this has got to be $1,000 a month. I'm thinking, Mabel, I don't know if I could afford this. I said, "How much does it cost to stay here every month?" "Well, now, I've been thinking about that." And I talked to my husband, Russ, last night, and, he hurt his back last week trying to mend a fence or something like that. And she said, "But I told him that I really like you. And we decided that you could stay here free, and we'll feed you, and we'll let you stay here for as long as you want. And if you need any money, just let us know." She said, "But there is one thing I'd like you to do if you could." Well, I said, "What's that, Mabel?" She said, "Well, if it snows, will you shovel our walk?" She said that. And I just melt. I just started crying in front of this woman. I said, "I can't believe this." She says, "We like you. We like you." Here I am at commencement. It's graduation day. Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio spoke. It was boring. The dean of the university spoke. It was boring. And I got up to talk, and my father was in the front row. And I gave what they said was the most profound speech that they had heard at any commencement. And I called it the indispensables to learning: honesty, open-mindedness, and the willingness to take action. From page 570 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I basically stole it from AA. They were amazed by those 3 basic principles: honesty, open-mindedness, and the willingness to take action. Now, after that, my father was going around telling people, "That's my son." Now, I'll never forget when I got arrested for shoplifting. No, I don't think I recognized that little guy over there on the front left. He was so proud. And the really interesting thing was that I was able to single out and let other people know of Mabel's generosity. Now, I was able to accumulate a couple of different academic scholarships, of which my parents are extremely proud of, because it really helped pay for the education. But the thing that I wanted everybody to know at commencement was what Mabel allowed me to do: live in her home free. And that's what I talked about in terms of what the real things that count. And I'll never forget it, she stood up, and she's this big woman, this fabulous woman. She was crying. And everybody, there's like 3,500 people just applauding this woman for what she had done. I'll never forget how good it felt to let her have it all. It was an extraordinary opportunity. In 1989, after 13 years, I was inducted into the American Society of Golf Course Architects alongside of Jack Nicklaus. Tonight's speaker is really someone who is a good friend, and he's an outstanding speaker. And he has a wonderful young heart. And you're in for a wonderful treat with Keith. He's got a better half, and that's Julie. And I got a better half, and it's Catherine Mackenzie. Now, she's a Protestant Irish, and I'd like you to know that. And I spoke at a Saturday afternoon meeting a couple of years ago up in North Shore Roundup. Happened to be this young girl there that heard me speak, of which I never knew she was there. I didn't have any idea. There were a number of different people. And it's always best if she tells the story, but I don't think she would stand up here and do that. But she took her time and thought about, what I had said and called me 2 years later. And we sort of, conveyed back and forth a little bit on the internet and talked to a couple phone conversations. But she said to me things that got my attention, because she told me some things about what she heard, not saw, but what she heard coming from the podium. And that got my attention, because you know what? I actually thought she was listening. She didn't hear the words, but I think she may have seen something that comes, in not so much from words, but from what I struggle to share with this wonderful life I've been given through Alcoholics Anonymous. And so we hooked up, and we talked, we shared, and we got to know each other. And she has a better program than I do, I can tell you that much. She had 16 years of sobriety, 14 years at the time. Came in when she was 17. And I had an opportunity to take her somewhere. She was born in County Antrim in Lisburn, Ireland. And her mother is just this wonderful little Irish woman, and her father is this real Baroque Scotsman from Glasgow. And I thought it'd be interesting to take her back to Ireland for her birthday. So we rented this little teeny van, and we kind of drove around Ireland, got to meet her relatives that she hadn't seen in many, many years. And I kind of arranged this thing, because she was so special to me, that I took her to the exact hospital where she was born in County Antrim, at the Lagan Valley Hospital on her birthday. Matter of fact, we even walked up to the maternity ward where the little babies are. And we kind of strolled around through it, and we came around outside and sat down out in front of the place, and I said, this is the place where you started your life. And through a bunch of bumbling words that I couldn't get out, I said, I just want to know if you'd want to finish the rest of your life with me. And she said she would, and I proposed to her, and I didn't even have a ring. All I had was a ring holder. I bought a little thing, that you could put a ring on, you know what I mean? Some of us are sicker than others, that was. And I basically asked her to marry me, and she said yes, and we got married last October 23rd. She's a strong member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to convince her to leave Victoria, British Columbia, to come to Kansas City, where the ocean meets the mountains, right? Where poor Toto is still counted being whirled in a tornado and cast somewhere into Oklahoma by now. But the point is that we have a common thread. And we were not boy meets girl on AA campus. We were actually two sober people trying to live our lives as best we could through the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we somehow found it to come together. And I'm so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous for my relationship with Katie, who is by far one of the most considerate people I know. I had a point in time when I asked my sponsor, George, when I was mistaking you as a new person? Remember that episode, when I thought you were new? I'm just curious, why didn't you stop me? Oh, no, you were beautiful, he said. No, you were beautiful. You had all that enthusiasm, he said. Enthusiasm? I never heard anybody describe me as enthusiastic. You know, I'm spastic, you know, maybe too much energy. He's hyper. He has a short attention span. He has learning disabilities. He can't sit still long enough. But nobody ever said I was enthusiastic. Ever. When I was back in college, the second time, and, you know, I was a little more open-minded than I'd ever been at any other time in my life, I found myself at this library where they have the Cambridge Unabridged Dictionaries, which is an entire volume of 26 books, you know, and each one is, you know, a letter for every alphabet, for every one in the alphabet. It's huge. It's one of the massive, you know, collections of words anywhere. And I looked up that word enthusiasm in the Cambridge Unabridged Dictionaries, and it's derived from a Greek word meaning entheos. Entheos. It's Greek. And it means inspired by God. Inspired by God. If Sister Mary Resentment and Mother Superior would have said, well, he's just inspired by God, it may have turned out a little bit differently. But I think I was a little too inspired at that point, even for them. And it was amazing to me when I read that if that's what enthusiasm is, it means inspiration from God. And you know, the first time I got drunk and that euphoric state came over me, that's what I actually sort of felt. Was that overwhelming sense of I don't know what it was, but it was powerful. Unfortunately, at the time I was a cucumber and now I'm a pickle. And ain't no more pickle going back to being a cucumber. I somehow crossed over the line and became an alcoholic somewhere. Can't tell whether the 5th drink or the 50th or the 100th or whatever, but I am now a pickle and ain't no more going back. When we went as a group to the 25th International Conference in New York, because I actually went and talked, it was a very short talk I gave about humility, that little panel I was on, very short. And we were able to find time to go to World Service Headquarters, General Service Headquarters, and where the AA headquarters is in the Grapevine, and there was a clan of us. We were from Akron, and we thought it was so great. And we went upstairs, and Nell was still working there, Bill's secretary. And when she found this little, you know, group of young people from Akron, Ohio, she took a little special interest in us, and she gave us a neat little tour of the archives and everything else. And I stumbled on, I looked at and I saw this letter on the wall. It was this letter from Dr. Young that was talking about on page 27. And Mr. Wilson had written to him in the beginnings of AA, asking him what this vital spiritual experience was that Roland had talked about, because Wilson wanted to know, what is that? Can you help us? We're trying to figure this out. And his letter is response. And it basically said, I can't tell you in psychoanalytic terms pretty much what it means. I can't tell you in religious or theological terms what it means. And here the man says, in all humility, Dr. Young says to Wilson, I've traced the word alcohol to its origin, and it comes from a Latin word, spiritus. And I don't know if any of you realize at one point in time they used to describe alcohol as spirits. And I think that's somewhere around the time when the Knights of the Round Table would, you know, drink the grapes, and they had the spirit stuff in it, and they'd forget where they parked their horse, and they'd forget where they lost their lance, and they had a weird taste in their mouth in the morning like I did, and they didn't know what it was. And I said, well, it's the spirits in that stuff that does it. But alcohol comes from the Latin word spiritus, and that means the breath of life. That's what we are, breathalytics anonymous. But that's what alcohol did, was it gave me that breath of life. But unfortunately, I'm not, as was described, as one of those social drinkers. I'm the 1 in 10 that turns into the pickle and ain't no more going back. But today my definition is I am the breath of life inspired by God. That's a little bit different than my amoebas of America, with that first impression I had about the members of Alcoholics Anonymous. You have honored me with your attention. I'm so fortunate to be sober today, because it really has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with the word we. Katie and I got married in a very special place. It was a small ceremony because she's a half illegal alien. She's still kind of in residence, applying for residency. But we brought her parents in, and we got married where Bill and Bob met, at Stan Hewitt in Akron, Ohio. We got married in the same place where AA came together on Mother's Day in 1935. And it's a really special place. It's a really special place. Founders Day is something that occurs in Akron. I was involved in young people's work and got involved in that, and if you can get to Akron, go. It's really a wonderful thing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.